All right, aloha. So this is the video for us to be able to go over the basic terms for this chapter. This is chapter 7. So things to be aware of for this chapter. Let me pull up my notes here. Addressing. So that's one of the key things that this chapter is about, both IP version 4 and IP version 6. See what I did there? Both of those, being able to understand what is the address, what are the parts, what are the components, what do things mean in an address? So for instance, with a 32-bit address, can you distinguish based off of the prefix or what we call the CIDR notation or the subnet mask, what part of that network, what part of that IP address identifies the network, and what part of that identifies the hosts within that network. And so understanding how in the case of IPv4, how the 32-bit address is created, and in the case of IPv6, the 64-bit address, how those are created, being able to recognize what the different numbers mean in terms of, is it a public IP, private, experimentation, local loopback, link local or a loopback address. So you should really be able to identify what are those different parts of an IP address, whether it's for IP version 4 or IP version 6. Definitely need to understand about subnetting, how to create a subnet with a particular number of hosts. If you need to accommodate, let's say, 73 hosts, what size subnet do you need to specify as a minimum in order to have enough IP addresses for 73 hosts? Plus, of course, you still need the broadcast and one reserved for the host for the network as well. So, being able to understand subnetting and converting between the dotted notation, like 255.255.255.0, that's a very common subnet, and being able to take that and understand if you use the prefix notation or CIDR, the classless CIDR, what slash would that be the equivalent of? So a 255.255.255.0, that would be an equivalent of a /24. Okay, why? You should be able to understand what that means and recognize that and be able to convert those and things. You'll definitely need that for both the final exam as well as the case study coming up for this class. Tunneling, understanding not only how version 6 IP packets can be encapsulated and embedded inside an IPv4, but in general, tunneling is a concept that we use for security, for VPNs, or for other considerations. And then also with IP version 6, understanding what are some of the equivalencies. So for instance, in IP version 4, we talk about a broadcast address where we send messages out to everybody that's on that local network. And we use that often when we're trying to get information. What is an equivalency of that in IP version 6? Is there? There is. So, and that one for IP version 6 is called the all node multicast. So being able to recognize, okay, well, what is that? How does it work? What is the IP address that corresponds with that? In the case of broadcast for IP version 4, it's always the very, 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 very last IP address in the network range for that, for any given network. It's not the same. It is a standard IP address that's always the same within a network for IP version 6, but the IP address is the same, whereas with version 4, the IP address changes, but is always the last IP address. So there are differences to be aware of. So those things, those are the key elements out of chapter 7. Good luck, and talk with you later. Aloha.